She was a soldier with more scars than medals. He was a single dad trying to make peace with the past. On a snowy afternoon, their paths crossed, not with words, but with a whisper. "I failed you, Mom." What Jack discovered next would unravel a truth so painful, yet so deeply human. It would change all their lives forever. This isn't just a story about grief. It's a story about healing, about how kindness shows up when we least expect it, and how love, no matter how broken, can find its way home. If stories like this speak to your heart, we invite you to stay a little longer. Like, share, and subscribe to Soul Moment Story for more timeless tales that remind us the quietest moments often carry the loudest miracles. And now, let the story begin. The wind sliced through the park like a cold memory. Snowflakes fell in thick silence, muffling the world in white. Jack Morgan tightened his scarf, one hand gripping the small glove of his 7-year-old son, Ben, as they made their way home through the long stretch of frozen trees. The boy was humming something under his breath, off-key but cheerful. Jack barely heard it. His mind was far away as always this time of year. Then he heard it. A voice barely more than a breath carried by the snow. "I failed you, Mom." Jack froze mid-step. The whisper wasn't loud, but it was raw. Not the kind of thing meant to be overheard, but something torn from the center of a person's soul. He scanned the empty park, eyes narrowing until he saw her. A young woman sat hunched on a snow-covered bench, just 20 feet ahead, arms crossed tightly around herself. Her military green uniform was stiff with frost. A large backpack sat slumped at her feet. Snow clung to her hair, her lashes. Her eyes were closed, but her lips trembled, as if the pain inside her refused to stay silent. Jack's instinct was to keep walking. This wasn't his business. It was late. Ben was getting cold, but Ben tugged his arm. "Daddy," the boy said quietly. "Why's that soldier crying?" Jack turned to him. "She's just having a hard day." Ben looked up, thoughtful in that way children sometimes are. "You always say we should help people when we can, even if it's small." Jack hesitated, his breath fogged in front of him. Damn the kid. He was right. He approached slowly, letting his footsteps crunch the snow so she wouldn't be startled. "Ma'am," he said gently. "You all right?" Her eyes flew open wide and startled, green, sharp, and stormy. She blinked as if waking from a dream, then stood quickly. "I'm fine," she said, brushing at her coat. "Sorry. I didn't mean to." Her voice caught. "You weren't doing anything wrong," Jack said. "Just looked like you could use some warmth." "I'm good," she said again, but her body betrayed her. She swayed slightly, knees trembling. Ben peeked from behind Jack's coat. "We're going home to have dinner," he said. "You can come if you want." The woman blinked, stunned by the boy's honesty. Jack cleared his throat. "It's nothing fancy. Just grilled cheese and tomato soup, but it's warm." She looked down at her boots. "I can't. I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be," Jack said, and for the first time in a long time he meant it. "Come on. No one should be alone out here tonight." She hesitated. Then finally she gave a small nod. "Okay." The walk back was quiet. Jack didn't ask questions, and she didn't offer anything. When they reached the small, snow-dusted house with the creaky porch and flickering porch light, she paused. "This is nice," she murmured. "Don't let the porch fool you," Jack said. "The heater inside's the real charm." Ben ran ahead, already pulling off his gloves. The woman followed slower, brushing snow from her sleeves. Jack opened the door and motioned her in. "I'm Jack," he said. "That hurricane with feet is Ben." She offered a faint smile. "Emily. Emily Carter." Inside warmth enveloped them like a blanket. The scent of garlic and butter filled the small kitchen. Emily stood awkwardly near the door, until Ben grabbed her hand and pulled her to the table. Jack moved around the kitchen with ease, clattering pans, slicing bread, humming low. Emily watched in silence the flickering kitchen light, casting golden halos across the chipped countertop and mismatched plates. When Jack finally set the bowls down, Ben clapped like it was Thanksgiving dinner. "Daddy makes the best soup," Jack chuckled. "That's because it's from a can, and I add exactly 1 drop of hot sauce. Culinary mastery." Emily managed a laugh, brief but real. They ate in near silence, but not the awkward kind, the kind that feels almost sacred. Emily's shoulders relaxed slowly. Her fingers thawed around the warm bowl. Halfway through the meal, Ben looked up. "Are you a hero?" Emily blinked. "What, you're a soldier?" Ben said, matter of fact. "My teacher says soldiers are heroes." Emily stared at her spoon. "Not all of them." Jack looked at her, saw something shift behind her eyes, a quiet storm. "I messed up," she said softly. "People got hurt. People I cared about. My mom. She died while I was deployed. I never made it back in time." Ben's smile faded. Jack reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "You know," he said slowly, "my wife passed a few years ago. I used to sit right where you were every night telling myself I should have done more. Should have noticed earlier. Should have saved her." Emily met his eyes. "But guilt," he continued, "it's a trick. Makes you believe you're broken when really you're grieving. And that's different." Emily swallowed. "How do you know the difference?" "Because grief lets you move," Jack said. "Even if it's slow. Guilt just keeps you frozen." The room fell quiet. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside, something had begun to thaw. Emily wiped her eyes quickly and gave Ben a smile. "Thanks for sharing your dinner with me." Ben shrugged. "Mom always said kindness is like soup. It's best when it's hot and shared." Jack smiled, but his heart stung. He hadn't heard Ben quote her in months. As the clock ticked toward bedtime, Jack offered Emily the couch. "It pulls out," he said. "Not the Ritz, but it's warm." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Before turning in, Jack dimmed the lights. He paused at the hallway, glancing back. Emily sat alone on the edge of the couch, one hand on her backpack. She didn't look like a soldier anymore. She looked like someone just trying to find her way home. "I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something," she whispered. Jack nodded. Maybe it's time someone was. Then he turned and left her in the quiet warmth of a stranger's kindness. Outside, the snow covered the world in white silence again. But inside, the first light had just come on. The wind howled louder that night, rattling the window panes like a warning from the world outside. But in Jack Morgan's modest living room, quiet reigned. The hum of the old space heater, the tick of the wall clock, and the soft rustle of blankets were the only sounds that lingered. Emily Carter lay on the pull-out couch, eyes wide open in the dark. She had been trained to sleep in combat zones, under gunfire, beside engines, roaring loud enough to shake her bones. But this silence, this stillness, it felt almost unbearable. She could hear her heartbeat too clearly. She could hear the weight of memory. The couch creaked as she shifted, trying to get comfortable. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, weathered photograph, a woman in her 50s, with bright eyes and a crooked smile, wearing a sweater 2 sizes too big. Her mother. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered to the quiet room voice, barely audible. "I should have come back sooner." She pressed the photo to her chest, blinking against tears that never fully left her eyes. Somewhere down the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Then a gentle knock. Emily Jack's voice was low, careful. "You okay?" She wiped her face quickly and cleared her throat. "Yeah, just can't sleep." There was a pause. "Happens to me too sometimes." Another pause. I could make tea. Emily surprised herself by saying, "Okay." The kitchen light was soft and yellow, like it knew not to intrude. Jack moved quietly, pulling 2 mugs from a high shelf and a battered tin of chamomile from a drawer that squeaked. Emily sat at the table, fingers laced around themselves. Jack placed the mug in front of her, then sat down across the table. He didn't say anything for a while. Neither did she. It was the kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. I used to think Emily finally said that I was doing something good. Serving, protecting people. You grow up hearing those words like they're armor. But then something goes wrong, and you realize they're just words. They don't hold up when people die. Jack watched her, not interrupting. She took a shaky breath. A guy in my unit, Corporal Dawson, he jumped in front of me during a raid, took the hit. I made the call that got him killed. Jack's voice was quiet. "You didn't pull the trigger." "No," she said bitterly, but I pointed where it should go. The heater clicked softly in the corner. Jack reached for his mug, held it without drinking. "I've made decisions I can't take back either," he said. "Not life and death, maybe, but close enough. Like not forcing my wife to get that checkup sooner." She brushed off the cough, said she was fine, and I let her. Emily looked up, her eyes searching his. "She died of cancer," she asked softly. "Lung cancer. Non-smoker. By the time they caught it, it was stage 4. I'm sorry." He gave a small nod. "I spent a long time thinking I failed her." They sat in silence again, the kind that started to feel a little less heavy. "Your son," Emily said after a while, "he's something." Jack smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. "Ben's got more heart than I'll ever have. He remembers the good stuff. I envy that." Emily traced the rim of her mug with one finger. "He invited me in like it was the most normal thing in the world." Jack chuckled. "He's 7. He thinks grilled cheese and tomato soup can solve any problem." Her lips curved slightly. "He's not wrong." Jack leaned back in his chair, looking at her, not with sympathy, but with something quieter respect. "You can stay here a while if you need to," he said. Emily blinked. "You don't even know me. I know enough. You needed a warm place for the night. And maybe you need it for a little longer than that." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't want to take advantage. I didn't plan on anything. I was just passing through." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes the place we don't plan on is the one we need most." Emily felt her throat tighten. Her mom used to say something like that. She looked down at her mug, then back at him. "I don't have anywhere else to be," she admitted. "Then you're in the right place." The next morning, Emily woke to the smell of cinnamon and the distant sound of cartoon voices. She sat up slowly, blinking into the light pouring in through the frosted windows. She hadn't meant to sleep that deeply, but somehow, in this quiet house, she had. Jack was in the kitchen flipping pancakes with one hand while pouring orange juice with the other. Ben was at the table coloring with intense focus. "Morning," Jack said with a grin. "Hope you're hungry." Ben says it's Pancake Friday, even when it's clearly Sunday. Emily gave a soft laugh. "Pancakes sound great." Ben looked up. "I saved you one with extra cinnamon. That's the best kind." Jack slid a plate in front of her, and for a moment she just looked at it. Steam rising, golden edges. Syrup waiting. It had been years since breakfast felt like something more than fuel. As she took her first bite, Emily felt something unfamiliar wrap around her comfort, maybe. Or the early edges of belonging. She didn't say anything about leaving. Neither did Jack. And that silence, it was full of understanding. The sun spilled through the kitchen window, like warm honey, casting amber light across the breakfast table. The smell of pancakes still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the scent of wood smoke, and something sweeter, maybe comfort, maybe peace. Emily Carter sat quietly in the corner chair, watching Ben press stickers onto a sheet of paper, like it was the most important mission of his life. Across the table, Jack rinsed dishes in the sink, humming a country tune too off-key to recognize. It felt almost normal, and that unsettled her more than she expected. She wrapped her hands around the mug of coffee Jack had poured for her, too weak, too sweet, but she didn't say a word. The warmth in her hand steadied her. Still, she couldn't stop staring at the third chair at the table. The one across from hers, tucked in like someone was expected. The fabric cushion on the seat, slightly indented, like someone had once sat there, often. Recently. Intimately. Jack noticed her gaze. He dried his hands on a dish towel and walked over, setting a clean plate on the counter behind her. "That was Maggie's chair," he said. Voice steady but quiet. Emily looked at him, unsure if she should say anything, but Jack offered a small smile, not forced, just tired. "She used to sit there every morning," he continued, "even when she was sick. Said it made her feel part of things. Said coffee tasted better when it was shared." Emily let the words settle between them like dust in sunlight. "She sounds like someone who made this place feel like home." "She did." Jack paused. "Still does. In some ways." Ben didn't look up, but his hand stilled on his paper. "I talk to her sometimes," he said suddenly. "When it's quiet, I think she still listens." Emily blinked, caught between awe and ache. Jack nodded. "We keep her picture on the mantel. Not for grief, for gratitude." There was a pause. Then Jack motioned to the coffee pot. More. Emily held up her cup. "Please." Later that morning, Ben tugged Emily's sleeve. "Want to see something cool?" She glanced at Jack. He gave a half-shrug, half-smile that said, "Go on." Ben led her to the living room, where a framed drawing sat on the small fireplace mantel. It was clearly a child's creation, crayon lines forming a stick figure woman, with long brown hair, arms open wide with a glowing yellow sun behind her. "That's my mom," Ben said proudly. "I drew her from memory." Emily knelt down beside him. "She looks kind." She was. And brave. "Like you." Her breath caught. "I'm not brave." Ben tilted his head. "But you're a soldier. Soldiers are brave." She looked at the picture, then at the boy. "Sometimes being brave means showing up, even when you don't feel it." Ben nodded solemnly, like he understood more than she gave him credit for. "She'd have liked you," he said. Emily's chest tightened. Maybe she would have. By late afternoon, the snow had let up. The sky turned a pale blue stretched with soft clouds, like someone had smudged chalk across the horizon. Emily stood on the porch, her jacket zipped halfway arms, folded against the cold. She was watching the wind shake the trees bare. Jack came up beside her, holding two mismatched mugs, one with chipped edges, the other with a faded cartoon moose. He handed her the moose. "I figured it's officially your second cup today," he said. "Might as well go big." She chuckled. "You always make jokes like that when I'm nervous, or trying not to say something stupid." Emily took a sip. "What are you trying not to say?" "Now," Jack hesitated. "Then, that I'm glad you stayed last night." She turned to him. "That doesn't sound stupid." "I know," he said, "but it still feels risky, letting someone in." He paused. "Not because of you. Just because it's been a while." Emily looked down at the mug. The warmth seeped into her palms. "I don't plan on staying long," she said. "I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea." Jack nodded slowly. Of course. But something flickered in his eyes. Not disappointment. Not quite. "I get it," he added. "People pass through all the time." Emily wanted to tell him it wasn't that simple, that she wasn't just passing through. That part of her, some small broken part, felt something shift last night when she sat at his table. when she heard Ben call her brave, when she saw the empty chair that still held meaning. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she asked, did Maggie leave a letter or anything? Before she passed, Jack shook his head. No letter. But she said something to me the day before she went. She said, "Don't live like I left you. Live like I loved you." Emily closed her eyes. That was the kind of sentence that stayed in your bones. That night, after Ben had gone to bed, Emily sat again on the pull-out couch. She stared at the ceiling for a long while. Then quietly, she reached into her pack and pulled out a creased envelope. The ink had faded, but the words on the front were still legible. To Mom. Someday. She never sent it. Never dared. Now, in the dim glow of a reading lamp, she opened the flap for the first time in 2 years. Her hands trembled. I don't know if I made the right choice, she had written. I joined because I wanted to make you proud. I stayed because I didn't want to feel like I gave up. But now, I don't know who I am without the uniform. I wish you were here to tell me I haven't ruined it all. The paper blurred as tears filled her eyes. She didn't hear Jack approach until he gently set a folded blanket beside her. I figured you might want this, he said softly. Emily wiped her cheek. Thanks. He didn't ask about the letter. He didn't pry. But before he left the room, he glanced back and said, You didn't ruin anything. People who care that much usually don't. Then he turned off the hallway light and left her alone with her letter, her silence, and the ghost of a chair that might just be waiting for her, too. The storm rolled in just after midnight. It wasn't loud. The snow didn't scream like rain or thunder, but its presence was undeniable. The wind swept against the siding of the house, rattling the shutters gently, like a ghost trying to get in. Inside, all was still. Until the scream. Jack sat bolt upright in bed. It was sharp and guttural, not the kind of sound one could ignore. His heart hammered in his chest. For a moment he thought it was Maggie, some echo from an old nightmare. But then he remembered. Emily. He threw off the covers and crossed the hallway in 3 strides, the old floorboards creaking beneath his feet. In the living room, he found her tangled in the pull-out bed chest, heaving forehead-damp fists clenched tightly into the thin blanket. No. Please, Dawson. No, she gasped, eyes still shut. Don't go, don't. Jack didn't hesitate. He knelt by the side of the bed and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Emily, he said softly. It's okay. You're safe. She jerked awake, her eyes wild, scanning the room like she didn't know where she was. It's just me, Jack continued, his voice, calm, steady. It's Jack. You're in my living room. You're okay. Her breathing came in short, broken waves. She sat up, slowly clutching the edge of the blanket like a life vest. Her face was pale, her jaw trembling. Jack didn't say anything else. He just sat there, with her in the quiet, letting the moment settle. Finally, her voice came ragged and low. I see his face every time I close my eyes. Jack looked at her gently. Dawson. She nodded. Corporal Eli Dawson, 23, from Omaha. He'd just bought a ring for his girlfriend. He was going to propose when we got home. Emily swallowed hard. He died saving me. I ordered us forward. I thought the area was clear. It wasn't. The IED was buried deeper than the sweepers caught. The blast, her voice broke. It should have hit me. Jack didn't flinch, didn't judge. He didn't try to offer cliches about war and fate. Instead, he asked quietly, Did you tell his family? She nodded slowly. I wrote a letter, never mailed it. Jack waited. He was like a little brother to me, she whispered, always cracking jokes, always trying to make people laugh even when we were exhausted or scared. And then, 1 second, he was there. And the next, her voice failed. Jack reached beside him and picked up the glass of water from the side table. He handed it to her without a word. She took it with shaking hands. "I know the nightmares," he said after a moment. "Different cause. Same weight." Emily looked at him, her eyes hollow. "I used to have them every night," he continued. "Right after Maggie passed. I'd wake up thinking she was calling me, or that I'd forgotten something that could have saved her. For weeks I didn't sleep, just wandered this house in the dark." He leaned back slightly, resting his arms on his knees. "One night I found Ben curled up on the couch. He'd woken up and saw I wasn't in bed. You know what he said?" Emily shook her head. "Daddy, if you're going to keep being sad at night, can you at least be sad where I can see you?" A soft, broken sound escaped Emily's lips, half laugh, half sob. Jack smiled faintly. "That kid. He's got a way of cutting through things." Emily nodded, wiping her cheek. "He's a good one. They say children adapt, but sometimes I think they're the ones holding the rest of us up." She fell silent again, the shadows on her face lengthening as the wind whistled outside. "You said earlier," Jack said gently, "that your mom passed while you were deployed." Emily stiffened. "Yeah. Heart failure. Sudden. You weren't able to come back." "Too late," she whispered. "By the time they told me, it was already over. Funeral everything." Jack exhaled slowly. "That's a wound no one trains you for." "I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year," Emily said. "We fought before I left. She didn't want me to re-enlist. She said I was chasing ghosts, trying to prove something." She looked down at her hands. "I told her she didn't understand, that she was just afraid." And now Jack asked. Emily's voice cracked. "Now I think she was right." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence two people share when they've finally stopped running from something. Jack rose slowly and retrieved a folded blanket from the back of the couch. He draped it over her shoulders, then sat back down. "You know," he said, "Maggie used to say that pain doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're still here." Emily looked at him. She said, "The moment you stop hurting is the moment you stop caring. And caring, that's the part we're not allowed to give up on." Emily closed her eyes. The blanket was soft, heavy grounding. "Do you think it ever stops?" she asked. Jack didn't answer immediately. Then, "No. But it changes, becomes something quieter, something that walks beside you instead of dragging you under." Outside, the wind died down. The house settled into quiet once more. "I'll try to sleep," Emily said at last. Jack stood. "If it gets bad again, just knock." She looked up at him. "Thank you." He paused at the hallway. "Any time." As he disappeared into the shadows, Emily leaned back against the couch cushions. She stared up at the ceiling until her eyes blurred, until her breath evened out. And for the first time in a long time, the darkness didn't feel like an enemy. It just felt quiet. The morning after Emily's nightmare arrived softly like an apology. Light filtered in through the kitchen window, pale gold and hesitant, casting long stripes across the linoleum floor. The air smelled of toast and cinnamon, Jack's unspoken peace offering. Emily sat at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. She hadn't said much since she woke, but the dark circles beneath her eyes were fainter. Her hair was tied back messily, and she wore one of Jack's old flannel shirts over her own t-shirt. It hung off her shoulders like borrowed calm. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor, nearby building an ambitious Lego spaceship, humming something tuneless as his brow furrowed in concentration. Jack emerged from the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a folded towel slung over one shoulder. "We're officially out of syrup," he announced, "which means we'll all need to dig deep and find the strength to survive this crisis." Emily smiled faintly. "I think I'll manage." "Courageous," he said. setting a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. Maggie always said you can tell the kind of person someone is by how they handle breakfast disappointment. Ben piped up without looking up. That's how she knew you were a grump when you ran out of bacon. Jack shot him a mock glare. Traitor. Emily laughed genuine this time. The sound caught Jack off guard. He hadn't heard her laugh like that before. It was small, yes, but real. Like something inside her had loosened. He liked that sound more than he should. Later, while Jack was out in the garage fixing the old snowblower, and Ben was preoccupied with transforming his Lego spaceship into a tank, Emily wandered into the living room. The couch had been neatly folded back into a sofa. A blanket rested on the armrest. There was a kind of quiet orderliness to the space, the kind born from people who've had to rebuild things, routines, homes, lives. She glanced toward the hallway. No sound. Alone. Her hand moved toward her backpack, half hidden beneath the coffee table. She pulled it out and unzipped the main pocket, revealing a small leather folder and an envelope yellowed bent at the corners, but still sealed. To Mom, it read in her careful handwriting. Someday. Her fingers hovered over the flap. She had read it again last night. Every word. The weight of it still sat on her chest. But something had changed. Carefully, she set the envelope down on the coffee table beside a stack of mail and a crayon drawing of Ben fighting a dragon. Then she stepped away into the kitchen toward the light. Jack came in 20 minutes later, shaking snow from his boots, muttering something about the carburetor. He poured himself a glass of water, then glanced toward the coffee table to grab the mail. The envelope stopped him cold. He picked it up slowly, recognizing Emily's handwriting. His thumb traced the crease down the middle. It felt like trespassing, even though it was left in plain sight. He looked toward the kitchen empty. He considered setting it down again, leaving it untouched. But something in him said she meant for it to be found. He sat down in his chair and opened it gently, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The words were written in dark blue ink, clean, and even at first then, more rushed, like the writer had stopped trying to pretend she wasn't falling apart. Dear Mom, I know I haven't been what you wanted. I didn't go to med school. I didn't stay safe. I didn't stay close. I joined up because I wanted to do something that mattered, to prove I was strong. I didn't realize how much I just wanted you to be proud of me. Now you're gone. And I wasn't there. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't even get to hear your voice one last time. And the part that hurts most is knowing I was too stubborn to call even when I wanted to, even when I needed to. I thought I'd write this when I was ready to come home. But maybe I'm writing it because I don't know how to find home without you. I hope wherever you are, you can forgive me. I hope you know I tried. I love you. I miss you. And I'm sorry. Jack stared at the letter for a long time. It wasn't just grief on the page. It was everything. Regret, guilt, love, fear. All the pieces people carry when they lose someone without closure. And it was written with the kind of honesty that only comes when you're no longer pretending to be okay. He didn't realize Emily had come back into the room until she spoke. I wrote that 3 months ago, she said softly. Never sent it. Never thought I would. Jack folded the letter carefully, reverently, and set it back on the table. I didn't mean to read it without asking. I left it out for a reason, she said. They stood there for a moment, the unspoken words thick between them. I've carried that letter longer than I carried my sidearm, she added, her voice trembling. I don't know why today felt like the right time to let go of it. Jack's eyes didn't leave hers, maybe because you're somewhere safe enough to finally set it down. Emily swallowed hard. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. You don't have to, he said. You just have to stay long enough to find out. She stared at him, searching his face, for doubt, for pity, for any hint that this kindness came with strings attached. But all she saw was quiet, steady truth, Her gaze dropped to the letter again. You think it's too late? To matter, Jack shook his head. I think it's never too late to forgive yourself. That night, after Ben had gone to bed and the fire had burned low, Emily sat by the mantel watching the embers flicker like fireflies in the dark. She held a pen in one hand. A new envelope sat in front of her. This one blank. Clean. She wasn't sure who she was writing to now, her mother herself or someone in between. But for the first time in a long time, she believed the words would matter. She believed they could lead her home. The snow returned overnight, thicker this time, and softer, like someone had laid a down comforter over the town while it slept. By morning, the world outside the Morgan house had turned into a quiet painting. No cars passed, no birds called, just the slow drift of white falling from a pale sky. Emily woke up, not to a nightmare, but to laughter. Ben's. She blinked against the light filtering in through the curtains, her mind slow to catch up with the unfamiliar sound. It wasn't the forced giggle of distraction she'd heard before. It was real, unguarded. Bright. She pushed the blanket off and stepped out into the hallway, following the sound to the front door. She could already smell it, pine needles, cold air, and something else. Something festive. Then she saw it. Jack and Ben stood out on the porch, boots deep in fresh snow cheeks, flushed pink. Between them stood a small pine tree, no taller than Jack's chest, planted upright in a red metal bucket, its branches dusted with powder. It wasn't much. The tree was crooked, its needles sparse near the bottom. But someone had gone to great care to decorate it. Twine wrapped loosely around the branches, and bits of fabric, old shirts, flannel scraps, even a few hand-tied bows hung like ornaments. Small paper hearts danced between them, flapping gently in the morning breeze. One of the hearts, written in Ben's unmistakably large, crooked handwriting, read, "You're not alone." Emily stood in the doorway, utterly still. Ben spotted her first. "Look, Miss Emily, Daddy." And I made a surprise. Jack straightened, brushing snow from his sleeves. He had the idea. I just followed orders. Emily stepped out onto the porch, slowly, her breath catching in the cold. She stared at the tree, at the effort, at the message. "What is this?" she whispered. Jack met her eyes. A reminder. She blinked. Of what he nodded toward the paper hearts. That no one gets through life without needing someone. And that showing up for each other, especially in the mess, is what makes it all bearable. Emily turned away quickly, hiding the sudden sting in her eyes. Her throat tightened, with something she couldn't name. "It's just a tree," Jack said, gently stepping closer. "But it's yours, if you want it to be." Ben looked up at her with wide eyes. "It's your welcome tree. Like when soldiers come home on TV." Emily couldn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because no one had ever done something like this for her before. Not her commanding officers, not her bunkmates. Certainly not the silence of the world she'd wandered through since discharge. She reached out, brushing a branch with gloved fingers. It was real, imperfect, beautiful in its simplicity. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Jack said. "You're already here." Later, inside with the tree glowing softly through the frost-fogged front window, Emily helped Jack string lights along the mantel. It was all mismatched, different colors, bulb shapes, a strand that only blinked on one side. But the room shimmered with a kind of quiet joy. Ben hung his crayon drawings beside the stockings, one of a tank, with wings, another of a snowman holding a puppy. Emily added her own touch, a small silver star from her keychain, which she pinned to the top corner of the bookshelf. When Jack raised an eyebrow, she shrugged. "It's the only ornament I own." He smiled. "Then it's exactly what the room needed." That evening, the three of them sat around the fire sipping cocoa from chipped mugs. Outside, the world remained wrapped in white. Inside, something warmer than fire crackled between them. Ben leaned sleepily against Emily's shoulder, his small hand tangled in the edge of her flannel sleeve. "Miss Emily," he mumbled, "will you be here for Christmas?" Jack tensed slightly, eyes flicking to hers. Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep distance, to protect the soft edges of something not yet fully formed. But another part, quieter, steadier, wanted nothing more than to stay right here in this exact moment, where nothing hurt and nothing needed fixing. She looked down at Ben. "Yeah, buddy. I think I will." Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Ben grinned, satisfied, then fell asleep with cocoa still clinging to his lips. Jack took the empty mug from Emily's hand. That was kind of a big answer. She nodded. It felt like one. He sat down across from her again, the firelight dancing across his face. "You've got time," he said. "There's no rush. Just know the door's open." Emily looked at him, really looked. This man who had lost just as much as she had, but had chosen to keep showing up. For his son. For himself. For a stranger on a park bench. And now, for her. "I know," she said softly. "That's what scares me." Jack tilted his head. "Why? Because it feels like I've finally stopped running, and I'm not sure I remember how to stand still." Jack gave her a long, thoughtful look. Then he leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Standing still isn't the same as being stuck," he said. "Sometimes it's just where healing starts." Outside, the little tree swayed in the wind, its paper hearts rustling like quiet promises. Emily stared into the fire, letting his words sink in. Maybe this was what coming home looked like. Not grand, not dramatic, just steady warmth. A soft chair, a crooked tree, and two people who'd made space for her without asking her to earn it. The snow had finally stopped. For the first time in days, the world wasn't muted by wind or wrapped in white. Everything sparkled beneath a pale winter sun. Rooftops gleamed like sugar tree branches glistened, and the roads were finally visible again beneath a slushy thaw. Emily stood in the mudroom of Jack's house, tying the laces on her boots. She'd found a faded army green parka in a box marked Maggie's winter stuff by the hallway closet. It fit a little big, but it was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and something floral lavender maybe. "You sure you're up for this?" Jack asked from the doorway. Emily glanced back. A walk in the sunshine after a week of living like hermits? "Definitely," he smiled. "Not just a walk. We're headed to the cemetery." She paused, fingers stilling on the last lace knot. "I go every year around this time," he added gently. "Ben usually makes a picture or leaves something for Maggie. You don't have to come." Emily stood slowly. "I want to." The cemetery sat on a low hill at the edge of town, surrounded by towering fir trees and a wrought iron fence that had long since rusted into a soft brown. The snow had been shoveled into neat paths between the rows of stones, and small flags fluttered next to the older military markers. Emily hadn't been to a cemetery since her mother's funeral. Her chest tightened at the thought, but she didn't say anything. Just followed Jack and Ben through the gate, each footstep soft in the snow. They stopped in front of a simple stone gray granite, modest in size. Margaret Maggie Morgan, beloved wife, mother friend. 1979, 2020, love is action. Emily stared at the inscription. Love is action. 3 words, and yet they felt heavier than any motto she'd ever saluted in uniform. Ben stepped forward and placed a crayon drawing on the base of the stone. It showed the 3 of them, Jack, Ben, and Emily, standing next to a Christmas tree with a crooked star on top. Everyone was smiling. I told her about the porch tree, Ben said. And your cocoa? And that you laughed at my spaceship jokes. Emily swallowed the lump rising in her throat. I think she would have liked that. Jack knelt beside the headstone, brushing snow gently from the edges. His eyes were dry but full. She hated winter, he said with a small smile, but she always made it feel warm. He stood and looked at Emily. "You okay?" She nodded. "Can I have a minute?" He didn't ask why, just took Ben by the hand and wandered down another path, leaving her alone with Maggie Morgan. Emily knelt in the snow, the cold biting through her jeans, and stared at the stone. "I didn't know her," she said softly, "but I know what kind of man she loved. I know the boy she raised, and that tells me a lot." Her hand brushed the smooth granite. "I've been angry for a long time. At the army, at myself, at my mom, at the world for turning quiet after it all went to hell. But Jack, he never asked me to explain. He just made space." She looked up, eyes misting. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making him the kind of man who knows how to do that." On the walk back, Emily fell into step beside Jack. They passed a row of storefronts, small-town staples, a bakery with fogged windows, a barber shop with candy cane stripes, a cafe advertising free cocoa with any sandwich. Emily couldn't remember the last time a place had felt knowable. "This town," she said, "it feels like something from a postcard." Jack grinned. "That's the trap. Lures you in with gingerbread and never lets you go." She chuckled. "You ever think of leaving after Maggie died?" He paused. "Yeah, for about a week. Then Ben caught me looking at apartments in Boise and said, 'But how will Mommy find us if we're not here?' That was that." Emily went quiet for a moment. "I used to think moving was strength, never staying long enough to grow roots, never letting people close enough to hurt you." Jack glanced sideways, and now she exhaled. "Now I'm wondering if I've been confusing strength with fear." They reached the corner where the war memorial stood, a black granite slab with names etched deep, flanked by 2 bronze flags waving eternally. Emily slowed. Jack followed her gaze. That was installed after Desert Storm, but they add names every year. She stepped closer. There, near the bottom, was a fresh engraving, CPL, Eli Dawson, 1998, 2022. He gave everything. We remember everything. Her knees almost gave. Jack caught her elbow without a word. Emily reached out, brushing her fingers over the cold letters. "I didn't know his name would be here." "He's from here?" Jack asked. "No," she said, her voice a rasp. "But his mom moved here last spring. After I sent the letter. She wanted to be somewhere quiet. She didn't know I'd end up here too." Jack didn't speak. He let the wind fill the space. "I wrote to her," Emily said. "Finally. After months. Told her everything. I never thought she'd write back, let alone ask them to place his name here." "She honored him," Jack said. "And honored you." Emily nodded slowly, tears stinging her eyes. He always said, she whispered, "If I go out, make sure it's for something that matters." "You're here," Jack said softly. "That matters." She turned to him, something raw in her gaze. "I've been surviving, Jack. That's all. Since the day he died. Since my mom died. Just surviving. I don't even know if I remember how to live." He looked at her for a long moment. Then gently, "You're doing it." Emily blinked. "What right now?" "Talking, grieving, laughing with Ben, holding cocoa like it's sacred." His smile was warm. "You're living. Might not feel like much, but it's real." Emily stepped back from the memorial. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. It reminded her she was here breathing, feeling, for the first time in a long time. They walked home in silence, but not an empty one. Between each step, there was something new forming, trust maybe, or the early shape of healing. As they neared the porch, Ben called out, "Can we make snow angels?" Emily looked at Jack, eyebrows raised. He gave a mock groan. Only if you help shovel the driveway after. Ben grinned. Deal. And just like that, the weight lifted a little. Snow angels. Laughter. Warm hands brushing snow from shoulders. Life again. Not loud or perfect, but real and enough. The first crack of thunder was unexpected. Montana winters rarely brought storms. Like this, low sweeping winds, a sudden shift in pressure, and then the sky falling dark, like someone had flipped a switch. By late afternoon, the snow had returned heavier and wetter than before, and with it came a wind that howled against the windows like an old ghost demanding to be let in. Jack stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of stew, while Ben raced cardboard cars along the floor. Emily was in the living room helping him build a makeshift garage from cereal boxes and couch cushions. There was a warmth in the house that had nothing to do with the fire in the wood stove. Then, click. Silence. The refrigerator hummed to a halt. The lights above flickered once, then died. Jack looked up. Well, that's new. Emily peeked around the corner. Power outage looks like it. Ben's voice piped up, half thrilled, half worried. Is this like camping? Jack smiled. Exactly like camping, only with central heating that just retired early. Emily chuckled. Should we worry? Jack shook his head, already moving toward the hallway. We'll be fine. I've got extra firewood candles, flashlights, and enough matches to launch a revolution. Within 20 minutes, the house glowed in candlelight and firelight. Shadows danced gently across the walls, and the stew simmered over a small camping stove Jack had pulled from the basement. They ate cross-legged in the living room, bowls warm in their hands, the fire crackling nearby. Ben leaned against Emily's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't move away. This is kinda cool, Ben said, voice muffled around a bite of bread, like a snowstorm party. Emily smiled. I like that. A storm party. Jack glanced at her. You ever have those growing up? She shook her head. We didn't have many parties. My mom worked a lot, even on holidays. Jack raised an eyebrow. No traditions, no cocoa and cookies, no singing carols off-key. Emily took a slow sip of her soup. There was one thing. Every Christmas Eve, even if we couldn't afford a tree or gifts, my mom would light a single candle. Just one. We'd sit on the couch wrapped in blankets and she'd tell me stories about her childhood, her dreams, silly stuff mostly. But she always said the candle made the night feel special, even when we had nothing. Ben looked up at her, eyes wide. That's nice. Emily's voice softened. I didn't think much of it back then. But now, I miss that more than anything. Jack stood and walked to the mantel. He picked up a small white candle plane, unadorned, nearly forgotten. He handed it to her. Then let's make tonight special. Emily stared at it, caught off guard by the gesture. She took it slowly, her hands curling around the base. Do you have a lighter? Jack knelt by the fire and lit a match. He held it out, and together they touched the flame to the wick. The candle caught its little light, flickering steady. For a moment, the three of them just watched it. Silent. Reverent. Ben whispered, Can we tell stories too? Emily glanced at Jack. He nodded. She thought for a moment. Then she began. It was Christmas Eve in Kabul. She said softly, her voice steady. Our unit had just come back from a rough rotation, 3 days of sand checkpoints and heat that never stopped. We were exhausted. We hadn't eaten a hot meal in 2 days. But there was this guy, Private Vasquez. Big smile, always had gum in his pocket. He somehow convinced the mess hall to save us a tray of stuffing and mashed potatoes. Just one tray. She paused, her eyes distant, but focused. He laid out plastic forks and paper napkins, and he pulled a crumpled string of lights from his duffel. They barely worked, just blinked red and green like a confused ambulance. But in that moment, it felt like home. Ben leaned in. "Did you sing carols?" Emily smiled. "No. We argued about who got the last scoop of potatoes and made fun of the lieutenant's singing voice from the week before. But it was the first time in months we laughed without thinking." Jack sat across from her, now elbows on his knees. "That sounds like a moment worth remembering." "It is," she said. Then her gaze lowered. Most of the people at that table didn't come home. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was honoring. Ben reached over and took her hand, his small fingers warm against hers. Emily looked down at him, blinking quickly. "Thanks for listening," she said. "Most people don't ask." Jack's voice was quiet. "Most people are scared of the answers." She nodded slowly. "But not you," she added. He met her eyes. "I don't scare easy." For a long while they sat in the glow of the candle, the fire and the unspoken truths that passed between them. Then from the dark corner of the room, Ben whispered, "Tell us another one." Emily laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "All right. But you have to promise to share a story, too." Ben nodded solemnly. "Deal." Jack leaned back with a grin. This might be the best blackout I've ever had. Hours later, the storm still raged outside. But inside the house, warmth reigned. Ben had fallen asleep on a nest of blankets, a flashlight still clutched in one hand. Emily sat beside the fire legs tucked beneath her, watching the flame. Jack returned from the kitchen, handing her a second mug of tea. No power, no Wi-Fi, no phone signal, he said. And yet somehow, everything feels more connected. She looked up at him. "Funny how the quiet brings things out of you." He sat down beside her, not too close, but not distant either. "I meant what I said earlier," she said suddenly. He turned. "Which part?" "That I miss my mom's candle. Not the object, the feeling. Like even in the dark, something could still shine." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded toward the tiny flame still burning beside them. "You're shining now," he said, "whether you know it or not." Emily looked at the candle, then at Jack, then at the boy curled up beside them, safe and dreaming. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a soldier. She didn't feel broken. She felt home. The power returned sometime around 3 a.m., humming to life like an old friend, slipping quietly through the back door. The heater kicked in with a gentle whoosh, the refrigerator buzzed back to attention, and the lights blinked once, though none of them were on to begin with. Jack was already awake. He'd never been much of a sleeper since Maggie passed. Even on calm nights, something in him stirred before dawn, restless listening, as if waiting for a voice that no longer came. But tonight, the silence was different. It didn't ache. It lingered. He walked barefoot into the living room blanket draped over one shoulder, the warmth of the floorboards underfoot, reminding him just how deeply the little things mattered. Emily was there, still asleep, curled on her side near the fireplace. A mug of cold tea sat forgotten on the table, and the candle from the night before had melted into a soft pool of wax, the wick long since extinguished. In the firelight, she looked softer than he'd ever seen her. Not fragile. Emily Carter would never be fragile, but quiet in a way that spoke of trust. Trust in this space, in him, in the safety to simply rest. Jack didn't wake her. He just picked up the blanket and gently laid it across her shoulders. Her brow relaxed in sleep. He stepped back, intending to leave, when something near the corner of the coffee table caught his eye, a small, worn photo, half tucked under her backpack. It wasn't snooping, not really. It was lying there, visible. Familiar. He picked it up carefully. The image was sun-faded but clear enough. Emily, in uniform, younger, maybe 20. Her arm slung casually around a tall, grinning man with dark hair and a lazy smile. They stood in front of a Humvee desert, stretching behind them both flushed with heat and youth and something like hope. On the back, in looping handwriting, it read, "Dawson and Carter. Never miss the sunrise." Jack stared at it a long time. Then he placed the photo gently back on the table beside her tea. When Emily woke an hour later, the house was still dim, but no longer shadowed. The fire had died to embers, and soft light filtered in through the front window. She sat up slowly, tugging the blanket tighter around her. Her eyes found the photo instantly resting exactly where she hadn't left it. Her heart stuttered. Then she heard the kettle whistle. In the kitchen, Jack stood in front of the stove, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. He didn't mention the photo, didn't ask questions, just held out the tea. "Morning." She took it. "Thanks." They sat at the table, the silence between them unusually weighty this morning, gentle but full. Finally, Emily spoke. "You saw it." Jack nodded. "Yeah." She stared into her cup. He was my best friend, my shadow through 2 deployments. He used to call me Sarge, even when we were the same rank. Said it made me sound tougher. "Looks like he adored you." She gave a soft laugh. He did. Not romantically, I mean. We weren't like that, but he believed in me sometimes more than I did. Jack took a sip of tea. "What happened to him wasn't your fault." "I know that," she said, then paused. "And I don't." Jack waited. She looked out the window, eyes distant. He took my place. We were rotating night patrols. It was my turn. I was exhausted, falling apart from back-to-back missions. He offered to swap. I said yes. Her throat tightened. 3 hours later, they brought him back in a bag. Jack closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You know what I see in that photo?" She looked up, surprised. "I see 2 people standing in the middle of a desert, smiling like they knew they were part of something bigger than themselves. I see respect, partnership, and maybe the kind of friendship that doesn't get celebrated enough in this world." Emily swallowed. "He believed in you," Jack said. "Not just then. Still, every step you've taken since." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I left that life behind." He shook his head gently. "I don't think so. You carried it with you, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt." She looked at him for a long time. "And you? What did you carry?" Jack hesitated, then stood, walked to a small wooden box on the bookshelf, and pulled something out. A photo. He handed it to her. It was Maggie smiling beneath a cascade of dark curls, holding baby Ben in her arms. She looked vibrant, almost too alive to ever be gone. "I took that the day after Ben came home from the hospital," Jack said. She hadn't slept in 48 hours, but she insisted we take a picture because she said one day I'd forget the little things. He exhaled. She was right. I don't remember what I said to make her laugh like that. I don't remember if Ben had colic that night or if he slept, but I remember that smile. It reminds me to keep going. Emily looked at the photo, then back at Jack. "You still love her?" she said, not as a question. "Always will," Jack replied. "But love isn't something you run out of. It grows new rooms." She smiled at that. "That's beautiful." "It's messy," he said, "but true." That night after Ben had gone to sleep, Emily stayed by the fire again. She held Dawson's photo in her hand, the edges fraying with time and memory. She pulled a new envelope from her bag, not labeled, not addressed, and began to write, but not to Dawson, to herself. "You made it through. You're allowed to keep living. You're allowed to feel joy. You don't have to carry the guilt to prove you loved them." When she finished, she folded the letter, placed it beside Dawson's photo, and looked up. Jack stood in the hallway watching her. He didn't say anything. He just crossed the room, sat beside her, and offered his hand. She took it. No words, just the warmth of firelight, the beat of a healing heart, and the knowledge that this moment wasn't built on forgetting the past. It was built on carrying it forward together. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the Morgan house, drifting through open windows and swirling with the laughter of children. A small crowd had gathered in the school gymnasium for the winter festival. Neighbors, parents, teachers, and children all bundled in layers, cheeks flushed from the cold. Emily stood near the makeshift stage, watching Ben with wide eyes and a proud grin. He was halfway through his role as Snowman number 3 in a play about kindness saving winter. His lines were crooked, his buttons were falling off, but his voice rang with the unshakable confidence of a child who knows he's loved. Next to her, Jack leaned in and whispered. He had lived that last part. Something about hot cocoa diplomacy. Emily laughed, her hand brushing against his as she leaned in closer. Clearly takes after his father. I hope not, Jack replied. I never would have survived elementary school in a cardboard hat. She looked up at him, then really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen weeks ago. Peace. Not the absence of grief, but the kind that grows when a person stops resisting life and starts showing up for it again. When the play ended, Ben raced toward them, paper snow stuck to his sleeves, his smile wide enough to light the whole gym. Did you see me? You were amazing, Emily said, kneeling to hug him. You weren't even nervous, Jack added, ruffling his hair. Ben grinned. Because I saw you both. You were right there. That's how I knew it would be okay. Emily's chest tightened. Right there. Not as a visitor. Not as a guest. Part of it. Back home, as twilight softened the edges of the snow-covered street, Emily found herself standing in the kitchen, with her sleeves rolled up, hands dusted with flour. She was helping Ben cut cookie shapes, some stars, some trees, some indistinguishable blobs he insisted were battle snowmen. Jack was tending the fire, humming something tuneless under his breath. The house glowed with light and low music, with the kind of warmth that didn't just come from heat, but from something deeper familiarity. Emily glanced toward the dining table set for 3. 3 plates, 3 napkins, a tiny paper centerpiece Ben had made in school, a snowflake with their names scrawled across each point. Her gaze lingered on the seat across from her Maggie's chair. She'd never asked why Jack hadn't moved it, and now she understood. Some spaces don't need to be erased to make room. They expand if we let them. After dinner, Jack reached for the radio dial and clicked it over to an oldies station. Nat King Cole's voice crackled through the speakers, warm and slow. Emily stood by the window, watching snow fall again, this time gently like a hush over a crowd. Her reflection merged with the night outside the tree on the porch, still glowing with soft, mismatched lights. Jack approached from behind, holding out a hand. Dance with me. Emily turned, surprised. Now. He nodded. No audience, no pressure, just the kitchen floor and a really scratched vinyl station. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They swayed slowly, without rhythm, without need for it. Just 2 people battered by time, anchored by presence. I've been thinking, he said quietly, his hand resting lightly at her waist, about how this started. That night on the bench. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't want to be found. I didn't, she whispered. But you were, Jack said. And I'm not sure I believe in fate, but I believe in moments that change us, and people who walk into our lives when we've forgotten how to leave the door open. Emily swallowed the knot in her throat. I wasn't looking for a home, I know, he said. But maybe one was looking for you. She looked up at him, her voice steady but soft. I don't know what to call this. Jack smiled, eyes gentle. Let's not call it anything yet. Let's just be in it. The song faded into silence, and they stood there, still holding on. Not because they had to, but because it felt right. Later, after Ben had fallen asleep, surrounded by a fortress of stuffed animals and crayon maps of imagined kingdoms, Jack and Emily settled by the fire. She sat in Maggie's chair. It felt like the right time. Jack noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he passed her a cup of tea and leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "I think she'd like you," he said after a long moment. Emily looked over. "You think so?" Jack nodded. "She'd like the way Ben smiles around you. She'd like that you don't pretend to have it all together." Emily smiled faintly. "Because I don't." "That's the point," he said. "None of us do." She held her tea closer. The fire popped softly, casting dancing shadows on the ceiling. "I used to think healing would look like forgetting," Emily said, "or letting go of everything that hurt. And now I think it's about carrying it differently. Softer, with people who help you shoulder it." Jack met her eyes. "This chair's always been hers," she added, "but tonight it doesn't feel like I'm taking her place. It feels like she left room for someone else to belong." He nodded, voice low. She would have wanted that. Outside, the snow fell again, this time more gently, like a quiet closing of a chapter, not with sorrow, but with grace. Inside, the room was full of memories, of beginnings, of a seat that had never truly been empty, just waiting for the right soul to find it. The last Sunday of the year arrived quiet and silver gray, like the breath before a song. Snow blanketed the world in gentle curves and clean lines, erasing all the sharp edges of the past month. It had been exactly 30 days since Emily first stepped off that bus, her duffel slung over her shoulder, pain stitched into every step. Now she was shoveling the walkway with Jack and Ben, bundled in a coat that was definitely too big and gloves with a hole in one thumb. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her breath visible in soft clouds. And she was smiling. Jack leaned on his shovel. "You always shovel that aggressively. Or are you still mad at the sidewalk?" Emily tossed a scoop of snow toward his boots. "Let's just say I like my battles frozen and winnable." Ben ran between them, flapping his arms. "I'm making snow jetpacks. Excellent strategy, soldier," Emily said. "Permission to engage in aerial maneuvers granted." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Did he just outrank me?" Emily shrugged. Kids have battlefield immunity. They laughed, not just once, but with ease, with rhythm, as if joy had slowly become part of the language of this house. That evening, the three of them curled up on the couch. Ben had dozed off during a classic cartoon marathon, his head resting on Emily's thigh. Jack sat on the floor beside her, back against the couch, flipping through a photo album of old Christmases. He held up one of the pictures, a candid of Maggie holding Ben as a baby, both of them laughing, eyes crinkled in the same exact way. "She had this theory," Jack said softly, "that people aren't gone until the last person who remembers them forgets." Emily touched the edge of the photo. "Then she's still very much here." Jack looked up at her. "So is Dawson." Emily didn't reply right away. Instead, she gently reached over to the side table and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream paper. No stamp. No address. Just one word written across the front in clean, deliberate script. Mom. Jack sat up straighter. "I wrote this," she said, 4 days before deployment. "It was supposed to be my just-in-case letter. If I didn't come home." Jack blinked. "You kept it," Emily nodded. "But I never gave it to her. I didn't want her to worry." She took a breath. "After she died, I carried it with me. Through every mission, every base. I kept thinking I'd find the right moment to open it, burn it, rewrite it something. But I never did." Jack stayed silent. Emily placed the envelope on the coffee table and stood. "I'm going to read it." She stepped outside alone, wrapping her coat tight. The air was sharp and silent, the kind of cold that made everything feel sacred. She sat on the porch, swing candlelight from the living room flickering behind her. With careful fingers, she broke the seal. "Dear Mom, I know I don't say this enough, but I love you. I'm not always easy to love back. I close up, I get angry, I shut you out because it's easier than explaining why I keep choosing this path. But you should know this, everything I've done, every uniform I've worn, every oath I've taken, I did it because of you. You taught me to fight for what's right, to protect people who can't protect themselves, to stand tall, even when my legs shake. If you're reading this, it means I didn't come home. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the days I made you worry. I'm sorry for every hug I shrugged off too quickly, every phone call I let go to voicemail. But I hope, I pray, you knew how proud I was to be your daughter, how deeply I carried your voice in my heart. If you ever wonder if it was worth it, if you question why I had to go, I want you to know I believed in something. And I believed in you. I love you. Always, Em." Her hands shook as she folded the letter. The swing creaked softly beneath her. The stars blinked above like quiet witnesses. A moment later, the porch door opened. Jack stepped out holding 2 mugs of cocoa. No words, just presence. He handed her one, and they sat in silence, sipping warm chocolate while the wind curled around them like an old friend. "I never sent it," she whispered. "You just did," Jack said. On New Year's Eve, the town gathered for their annual celebration in the square, modest by big city standards, but full of heart. There were string lights across Main Street, homemade pies lined up for tasting, and a fire pit in the center where people threw slips of paper into the flames words they wanted to leave behind. Ben had written, "being afraid of 4th grade math." Emily had written one word, guilt. As it burned, curling into ash, she felt no dramatic release, no thunderclap or sudden revelation, just space. And sometimes, space is enough. Jack nudged her shoulder. "What are you keeping?" She looked over. "Hope." He smiled. "Good trade." At midnight, the bells rang out from the church tower, echoing through the valley. People cheered, hugged, kissed. Jack and Emily stood still, eyes meeting. "I never imagined this," she said. "Neither did I. But it feels right." Jack took her hand. "Then maybe it's time to stop imagining and start living." She leaned in, forehead resting gently against his. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. "To stay, to try," she corrected, a smile breaking through. He kissed her. Not because it was midnight, but because it was time. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Leave us a comment and tell us where in the world you're joining us from. Hearing your stories and kind words means more than you know. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. Your support helps us continue sharing these gentle, meaningful tales that remind us of life's quiet miracles. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.